Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. I'm Shane. I'm so glad you could join me today. Well, in this episode, I want to talk about more of the Law of One, the abilities of Ra, which is the person delivering this information with the Law of One through the instrument being hypnotized. And I want to get a little bit into the oppositional forces. Not to instill fear, but just so that you all are made aware of it, and it might make you a little more prone to realize if indeed you are under attack some sort of way by some of the unseen. I prefer to think of them as multi-dimensional entities or other higher density entities, but I believe they're referred to by some as demons or whatever you want to call it. But they're not to be feared. They're to be you need to be aware of them though, because they do exist, and they do not like it if you are in service to others, trying to help other people. And it's been real important that I become aware of it myself. But while I was going through the Law of One, I guess it was about halfway through the sessions, they became aware of a fifth density entity that didn't like what they're doing with the whole Law of One and channeling this information. And so there's a couple of cool instances where Ra demonstrates his ability, but first I want to get into the oppositional force. Um, Here we are. So in session 62, he greets him like normal. I am Ra, I greet you in the love and in the light of the one creator. But then he goes on to say, before we begin, may we request that a circle be walked about this instrument, and let then each of the supporting group expel breath forcibly, approximately 2½ feet above the instrument's head, the circle then again being walked about the instrument. Strange, huh? So they do as they're directed. I am Ra. We appreciate your kind cooperation. Please recheck the alignment of perpendicularity and we will begin. That was also done as directed. Now, if you look into how they set things up, they open a Bible, they light a candle, and they open it to John chapter 1. They do all these things to make the instrument comfortable because she's a Christian. And I guess she just has some reservations about being used in such a way. Because while she's channeling this information, it's not like the typical channel where the person's receiving and sort of relaying it. She has no recollection of it while it's happening. She is actually being sort of, if you can kind of think of it this way, taken out of her body, and then Ra uses the body, if you think of it like a cell phone or something, right? So she allows them to use her body to channel the information through her, use her voice and things like that. And along the way, there's cool things that happen, like they'll say, their message is being distorted because of pain she's having. Please stand by while we readjust the instrument's arm. I mean, it's really weird stuff, And then sometimes they've had to ask, can you please clear the instrument's throat or cough before answering this question, because I guess it was sounding phlegmy and they couldn't understand. So there's really weird but neat stuff that goes on during the channelings. But they become aware of something going on here. And it says, I am Ra, we can communicate now. And they ask, could you tell us what was wrong or what caused the necessity for the rewalking of the circle and the purpose of expelling of breath? I am Ra. This instrument was under specific psychic attack at the time of the beginning of the working. There was a slight irregularity in the words verbalized by your sound complex vibratory mechanisms in the protective walking of the circle. Into this opening came this entity and began to work upon the instrument, now in trance state, as you would call it. This instrument was being quite adversely affected in physical complex distortions. Thus, the circle was properly walked, the breath of righteousness expelled the thought form, and the circle again walked. Okay, the breath of righteousness expelled the thought form. So it's like they blew it away. I don't know. I'm just telling you what it says because this is all. Like I said, I was raised in church, and we heard about demons and oppression and possession and things like that, and them being around and praying to surround yourself with angels and things like that. But here is some real life stuff going on here, and it's pretty cool. So it says, what was the nature of the thought form or its affiliation? I am Ra. This thought form was of Orion affiliation. We've talked about that before. Orion is the negative group. Was the attack successful in creating any further distortions of the instrument's physical complex? I am Ra. This is correct. Now you notice how that Ra doesn't offer any extra information. They are real careful not to break the law of free will. So a lot of times they'll say, "Can you answer this question?" And they'll say, "Yes, we can," but they don't answer. They won't answer it until they actually say, "Well, will you answer the question?" So, what is the nature of this distortion? This thought form sought to put an end to this instrument's incarnation by working with the renal distortions, which, although corrected upon time-space, are vulnerable to one which knows the way to separate time-space molding and time-space distortions, which are being unmolded, vulnerable as before the, shall we say, healing. So I'm not really sure. I don't know if they're saying she was vulnerable for leaving the body to allow Ra to use the body, and then they try to use that to get in there, or something along those lines. But they ask, what detrimental effect has been done? I am Ra. There will be some discomfort. However, we were fortunate in that this instrument was very open to us and well tuned. Had we not been able to reach this instrument and instruct you, the instrument's physical vehicle would soon be unviable. They would have killed her. I mean, this is like serious stuff here. Crazy. They ask, will there be any lasting effect from this attack as far as the instrument's physical vehicle is concerned? I am Ra. This is difficult to say. We are of the opinion that no lasting harm or distortion will occur. The healer was strong, and the bonds taking effect in the remolding of these renal distortions were effective. It is at this point a question of two forms of the leavings of what you may call a spell or a magic working, the healer's distortions versus the attempt at Orion distortions. The healer's distortions full of love, the Orion's distortions also pure in separation. It seems that all is well except for some possible discomfort which shall be attended if persistent. Was the opening that was made in the protective circle planned to be made by the Orion entity? Was it a specific planned attempt to make an opening, or was this something that just happened by accident? I am Ra. This entity was, as your people put it, looking for a target of opportunity. The missed word was a chance occurrence and not a planned one. We might suggest in the, shall we say, future, as you measure space-time, as you begin a working, be aware that this instrument is likely being watched for an opportunity. Thus, if the circle is walked with some imperfection, it is well to immediately repeat. The expelling of breath is also appropriate, always to the left. And that sort of gets back into, I know I mentioned it before, you guys might have mentioned it, about ringing in the left ear is an indication of negative. Ringing in the right ear is an indication of positive. And the same way with thoughts that come into your left ear or right ear. And if it seems to be sort of in the middle or above your head, it's to be taken sort of like a synchronicity. And that thought just gets back to the right and the left brain, but also the old cartoons where you got sort of a demon on the shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder. And there was this one time I had drifted off to sleep, and I felt like I was about to have a dream, but I heard my wife, which was at work at the time, whisper in my left ear, like kind of in a way that, like, you know, she was trying to wake me up quickly though. And I woke up, and it was like an audible sound to me in my sleep, and I woke up and I looked, and I was just kind of like, what the heck? And then realized she was at work, and it seemed so audible while I was asleep, and I realized that it was my left ear. So I don't know if I was about to be shown something maybe in a dream or something, but anyway. So I wanted to bring up this whole thing because, and you guys can read in a little bit more to it, but I wanted to move on to some other stuff that you wouldn't have understood if I didn't bring up this entity. Now, this ends up being this fifth density Orion negative entity that's just sort of hanging around, waiting for opportunities to. Is this the one? I'm going to read a little bit further before I go to the other one because I think this is the one where it talks about. Yeah, this was their first encounter with this being. So evidently they have this ritual, I guess you would call it, that they do to cleanse the area, to protect whatever they're doing, and they missed the word or didn't walk the circle perfectly or did something wrong, and instead of redoing it, they just thought, that's good enough. But it left the doorway for this negative entity to come in and try to actually make her die, I guess. So, would you expand on what you said about the expelling of breath? I wasn't quite sure what you meant. I am Ra. The repetition of that performed well at this working is advisable if the circle is walked in less than the appropriate configuration. But you mentioned the expelling of breath to the left, I believe. Would you tell me what you meant by that? I am Ra. It is as you have just accomplished, the breath being sent above the instrument's head from its right side to its left. Questioner, is there anything we can do for the instrument after she comes out of trance to help her recover from this attack? I am Ra. There is little to be done. You may watch to see if distortions persist and see that the appropriate healers are brought into contact with this mind-body-spirit complex in the event that difficulties persist. It may not. The battle is even now being accomplished. Each may counsel the instrument to continue its work as outlined previously. They ask, who would the appropriate healers be? Okay, yeah, so that gets into some other information. Alright, so now I want to move on. Now that you know who this entity is that's hanging around looking for an opportunity to mess up this whole delivery of the message of the Law of One, I want to show you some cool stuff here. So the girl, the instrument, the one that's being hypnotized, she is I guess she sings in her free time or whatever, so she, I guess, was doing some type of singing recording, and there was some kind of sound on the tape, and I guess you guys have heard, where there's what they call it, Electra EMVs. I can't really remember I checked it out a while back, but it's like where you have these recordings and you can hear, like, it's almost like you can hear voices from the other side on them. And so I'm assuming something like that must have happened or whatever. So they get to where they call this fifth density negative entity that they just were told about. They'll refer to him as their fifth density negative associate, their fifth density negative. Was it a greeting from our fifth density negative friend? Stuff like that. So this is what they're saying right here. The questioner. Was the unusual sound on the instrument's tape recorder that occurred while she was trying to record her singing a greeting from our fifth density negative associate? They're asking if it was the one that they just had to expel or whatever. Now this is cool. Listen, I am Ra. No, rather it was a greeting from a malfunctioning electronic machine. Now I don't know. Sometimes you can tell they've got a good sense of humor, right? That's sort of funny in a way. Um, the questioner, there was no catalyst for the machine to malfunction from any of the negative entities. Then, is that right? I mean, it just was a function only of the random malfunction of the machine. Am I correct? I am Ra. No. See how they don't elaborate, they just strictly answer the question. What was the origin of this malfunction? Keep in mind, this is like 81, so she was probably using some old type of tape recorder or something, from back then. Now check out the Ra's ability here. This is really cool. I am Ra. There are two difficulties with the machine. Firstly, the instrument has a strong effect upon electromagnetic and electronic machines and instruments, and likely, if continued use of these is desired, should request that another handle the machines. Also, there was some difficulty from physical interference due to the material you call tape catching upon a joining, what you would call buttons, when the play button, as you call it, is depressed. So they ask, like we're wanting to know right now, how is Ra able to know all this information? This is somewhat an unimportant question, but it is just amazing to me that Ra is able to know all these trivial things. What do you do? Move in time space and inspect the problem? Or what? I am Ra. Your former supposition is correct. Your latter unintelligible to us. I'm sorry, it's so funny to me because they say, are you able to move in time space and inspect the problem? Right? That's the first that he says is correct. The second is, or what? They don't understand that. Your latter is unintelligible to us. You mean you move in time space and inspect the situation to determine the problem. Is that correct? I am Ra. This is so. Okay, so that was one cool thing that I came across. I was like, man, I got to share this because it came to mind. I had come across it a while back, but it's one of the things that just let you know that, this is for real. This is some real stuff going on here. So here was another one. That was pretty cool. It was actually in the next session. Can Ra please tell us the source of the unusual odor in this room this morning? I am Ra. There are two components to this odor. One is, as has been surmised, the decomposing physical vehicle of one of your second density rodentia. So there's a dead mouse or rat or something in there. The second is an elemental which is attempting to take up residence within the putrefying remains of the small creature. What the heck? The cleansing of the room and the burning of the incense has discouraged the elemental. The process of decomposition shall, in a short period of your time, space-time, remove the less than harmonious sensations provided for the nose. Oh my gosh, this is so hilarious to me. The way they talk is just so funny. But I wanted to share that with you guys because, and also this whole part that I just kind of skipped over. This, I don't know what they mean by the elemental. The second is an elemental which is attempting to take up residence within the putrefying remains of this small creature. Are they talking about something spiritual, or are they talking, because before that, the decomposition of it, the decomposing of it, would be the one odor. So the second being an elemental, I'm not really sure what that trying to figure out what could put off a smell like that, besides the decomposing part of it. But cleansing the room and burning the incense discouraged the elemental. But I thought it was funny when they said, in a little while, um, the less than harmonious sensations provided for the nose will go away. But yeah, I've got more on the way, but I wanted to make you all aware of the oppositional forces that are around. And if you just have the feeling like something's whispering something in your ear, because at the beginning of this year, I went through one of the darkest periods of my life, and I felt like I had something whispering constantly in my ear, that everything was meaningless and hopeless, and just I just felt like, for the first time, it was just so bad that I felt like it had to be an outside force coming in on me, and just whispering in my ear, or doing something, because just things, even happy things, were not happy at all for me. And now that I know that, I ask for help if I begin to feel down and stuff like that. And I haven't been that far down, but I want to encourage you all to just ask for help, just within your heart, say, please help me through this, or whatever. Please protect me. A lot of times, if I feel like there's some negative entities around me, I'll just say, bathe me in love light to discourage any negative entities from being around me, and things like that. And I feel like it really works. All you got to do is ask. So with that, I'm going to leave you all, and I'll work on some more raw material for you guys, because there's a lot from raw to decipher, and I almost wish there was a different translation, because of some of it can be difficult to take in. You got to listen and read it several times to figure it out. But we'll figure it out together. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.